Welcome to this short hip flexor release. It's one of my favorite places to relax and release in the body. And I find it has the most profound effect out of all the other muscles in the system and the body. It has the most profound effect on mood and sense of well-being and ease throughout the day. So I find myself doing this sort of thing all day, every day. You might want a blanket and 2 blocks, but you might find them unnecessary. So you're going to set up on your knees. You can cushion if you like. Blocks or not, we're just going to step the right foot forward, pretty far forward. Coming into a lunge, let the knee be right about above the ankle, and then send that left knee back just a little bit more. At first, squeeze the right heel to the left knee. Create some heat and energy in that left front hip flexor. And then release it completely. Let the hips melt forward, and the heart will stay light. And the body will find its usual groove. And so to work against that a little bit, I invite you into just a little bit of rocking if it would serve you. So you want the lateral side, the side of the hip flexor, as well as the medial side of the hip flexor, and the belly of the hip flexors. You just want to find every angle you can. And still living fully in the breath. So it is of utmost importance in our awareness. Breath's big and soft. And then one more time, squeeze your left knee to your right heel and right heel to the left knee. Let's hold it pretty firm for 10, 9, make that hip flexor work, 7, 6, 5, 4, like you're dragging that knee forward, 2, 1. Release, about 6 seconds. You might need to crawl that right foot a little farther forward. And then we're going to crawl back to back off. Send your hips inside that left heel. If that didn't work in your body, fold this blanket up, send it underneath that right side seat. This might feel like enough. Or tuck your tail, and you're going to tip yourself back. The final option will be a total reclining, but I want to offer this because I know many of you will find it pretty comfortable, or most comfortable, is to come onto blocks right behind the heart. And then one behind your head. And the same kind of thing. You want to make sure you're not just relying on one little angle of the hip flexor. So tuck your tail and see if there's any room to kind of shift side to side. See if you can find just a new place at the hip flexor. Or maybe today it feels more like your quads, and that would be fine. One of them flexes the hip anyway. And just find a kind of new place to settle. Keep releasing at the neck, and if you'd like to come down further, do. I know plenty of you are very flexible, and so if that's you, you could bend the right knee. If you're still feeling super open, hug that knee towards your chest, even extending the leg toward the sky. But no medals are earned for any of this. So we're still looking for the left hip flexor stretch. If you sort of lost focus there, it's not worth trying to look any certain way. We're going for feeling, not aesthetics. Nice big breaths. It's as much a letting go as it is a stretch. So you look for a place to stretch that isn't so intense that there's just no way the muscle's going to let go for you. You might have to go like 75, 80% just to let the belly of the muscle truly just kind of bleh for you. way you're not irritating it at the joint ends. We'll bend this right knee, plant that foot, and then press the heel down to lift your seat. Okay. We'll squeeze the seat, and by doing that, we find a little extra active stretch for the hip flexors. We'll stay for just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Set it slowly down, and then tip over to the right a bit if that feels necessary. Use both hands, climb on up. Still tipping to the right, extend this left knee, give it some loving. Okay, get your blocks again. We're going to prop up onto the knees just as we started on the first side. Setting up the same way with our cushion. Step the left foot forward, a good bit forward, and then bend the knee enough to have it hover right above your ankle. Don't go to a depth right away. We're going to squeeze. So left knee or right knee to left heel and left heel to right knee. Squeeze it pretty intensely. You want the right hip flexors to be kicking on, activated, fired, and warming. That will enable them to release and stretch even more effectively. And then we go passive on it. Let the hips sink forward and the heart will still lift. What's it like to release resistance, really give your hips to gravity? If you find it useful to experiment with the angle, do that. So you can sway a little or rock a little. Find a new and fruitful angle of the hip flexors to open. And still the breath reigns. You might find you need to inch that back knee back a little bit. Then back at neutral, one more time, squeeze the heel to the knee and the knee to the heel. Get pretty intense about it. Squeeze it with some effort for 10, 9, 8, 7, like you really could shift that knee forward. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then release. About 6 seconds. You might need to wiggle that foot a little farther forward to get the most from it. And then we'll back on off. So help yourself to sit just inside that heel. If this doesn't work, fold up the blanket, stuff it underneath your left seat. Tuck the tail a touch. Keep the knees pretty close together if that's possible. You might want to set up on your blocks. Check in. It's not worth suffering. If that knee lifts on you at any point, often that's an indication you've gone a little too far. So back off. What's the big hurry? Same thing, if you find that you just kind of go in toward a specific angle, on the same angle every time you're here, it's worth seeing what it's like to rock to one side, rock to the other. Get a new place at the hip flexors or the quads. If it would serve you, come all the way down. You can even actively send the right knee toward the ground. Bending left knee perhaps, tucking tail again. If you want to, draw the knee in toward your chest. Maybe extend the leg. Okay, again we step the left foot down on the ground. Press the feet down, lift through the seat, and squeeze the seat and get that active opening. For 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Set it down. Help yourself to a seat and can tip to the left. Stay safe in the knee. Extend it slowly. Yeah, it's a pretty intense stretch. You can't expect to just kind of pop back into place. Give it some love. Some of you can. And then we're going to move on to the belly. Setting up for Bakasana type of poses. So for some, you might want to keep a little blanket for underneath your hip bones. But if you can manage without it, come into Sphinx with your elbows underneath your shoulders to start. Okay, keep your knees about hips distance apart. It gets easier if you take them wider, but for that reason, we don't want to bypass our opening and keep the knees pretty close together. Put a bend in your left knee. Take hold of that foot from the inside if you can. We're going to get to our active stretch first. So in our active stretch, I'm going to draw this elbow towards you, lift the heart intentionally. Then kick into your hand and start to lift the knee off the ground if possible. If your knee went wide, that's okay. Just put some energy into drawing it back into your midline. Keep it for 10, 9, I'll be quiet. Little tuck of the tail. Set the knee down, draw your hands up closer to the toes, maybe even in their direction, and then pull the heel to your outer seat. Release it. Bend the knees, rock them side to side, and we'll free the hips a little. Okay, re-extend both legs for a sec. Send your heart up again, and bend the right knee. Reach back to grab the inside edge of that foot. Make it active by sending the heart up actively and kicking that right foot into your hand with some intention. Okay. Lift the knee off the ground if possible. Put some energy into drawing it back into your midline, even if that means you don't get as high. That's all right. You're going to lift for 10, 9. Stay with it. 8. Keep going. Little tuck of the tail will help keep it isolated at the glutes, right behind the hip flexors, instead of at the back. And then release. Draw your fingers in the direction of your feet if you can, or just pull that foot in close to the outer hip. Some of you are flexible enough for the toes to touch the ground or get close. Let's breathe. And then release release. Rebend both knees, rock them side to side. Let the hips go and even melt your whole chest and head down. And press into your hands, climb up onto the knees. You're going to set up for a camel opening for hip flexors. I like to tuck the toes. I don't know why. I think it protects the knees, keeps things feeling active and safe. I'm going to tuck the tail, not too much, just enough to get that engagement at the seat to keep the pelvic bowl neutral, and start sending the hip flexors forward and the front of the hips forward. Lift through the chest, and then grab hold of heels. Squeeze the seat, keep sending it forward and up. Lift through your heart, let the head drop back if possible. Big breaths. Let's come all the way up. And then sit down on the heels. Take a moment neutral. All right, we're going to return to one of our earlier stretches, but I bet we've got more opens since we did it in the beginning. So we'll bring the blanket right into center. We're going to change it up anyway. You might want the blocks in your hands, but they're totally optional. Come onto the blanket with your knees. Step the right foot forward, a good bit forward. Send the hips forward. And then wiggle that right foot forward. Let's just stay long enough to kind of get used to it and acclimate. This time though, take your gaze over to the right. So you want to feel that stretch all the way from the left ear and jaw to the hip flexors and quads. Can you continue twisting? So walk your hands farther and farther to the right. You're just inching them though. And then walk yourself forward. And one last phase of this is just to wiggle that right foot a few inches farther forward. See if that left knee has about a centimeter or millimeter to go back. So you're kind of flirting with split, and it really doesn't matter if you get into split. You might even get more from it at this kind of really long, low lunge. Where can you release? It's not just a stretch we're looking for. Remember, it's like an exhale at the belly of the muscle. And inch yourself out. Let's come back onto the knees and just take a second in between. Coming high onto the knees to start the second side. Step the left foot pretty far forward. Let your hips melt forward. Heart stays light. Shift your gaze over to the left. We're looking for that length between the jaw or the ear, down all the way, connecting to the front of the right hip. Keep the right hip heavy. And then keep inching yourself over to the left. So just the act of twisting here will pull a little extra length into the front right side body, including the hip flexors. Stay full in your breathing. The breathing is shallow or it's not possible to take full breaths, it could be an indication you've gone too far and you gotta back off a little bit. No shame. And we'll face forward one last time. You're going to try to inch that left foot even farther forward so it's a weirdly long low lunge. Maybe the right knee has 1 millimeter to inch back. Stay supported as you give your hips to gravity. And then inch your way out. Come back onto knees, seated, neutral. And you'll come to recline. If you've got 2 blocks in your blanket, you're going to use them. You can also sub for a pillow or just rolling up the blanket. But the idea is you want a little bit of height behind the hip flexors and some softness over them. I'm going to come recline with the blocks right behind the crease of your hips. Lay all the way back. Now be honest with yourself. If you feel this at your low back, which could be like your psoas, bend one knee. See if that alleviates it for you. You know, it might take time for that kind of pain to pass. And then, of course, you could switch the legs. If neither is working, you know, if that's not working with bending one knee, then you'd bend both knees and see if you can let go. And if that's still just too much, then you'd get onto lower height, like just the blanket rolled in half or something. You know, so we give ourselves time for the release to happen, but if you can, both legs are straight. And then if you want even more intensity from it, it's not for everyone, you just walk your feet over to the left a little bit, cross the right ankle over. You should get an extra little tug at the right hip flexor there. The higher your hips are, the more you'll feel that, and of course the farther you walk over. All right. We'll give ourselves enough time to really settle in. So the ego can get you about 3 seconds of, yeah, I can do that, it's fine, no problem. And then past that point, the body starts to speak up a little bit. Keep sending signals to your neck to let go. And breathing can be passive, but let it roll fully in and out. If this is serving you and you'd like to stay longer, of course you can always pause and stay a little bit longer, but you're going to come back through center. Feel center. And then walk your feet over to the right, cross the left ankle over. Start that process of really tuning in. What is the body really feeling? Can I really go farther? Same thing. If you'd like to pause and stay a little longer, of course do. Otherwise, make your way through center. You can bend your knees to remove at least some of the height. You want to choose to stay on the blanket, you might do that. Even folding it in half. It's a gentle elevation. Re-extend the legs. We'll take a brief Shavasana. Best chance to really release, especially at the psoas. You could self-massage right at the inner rim of the pelvis, at the iliacus, hip flexor. And trace that line all the way down, across the hips. And ultimately releasing completely. If you have time to stay longer, I hope you will. If you're ready to climb on out, let's take deep breaths, bring some movement in. And take your loving way on up to a seat. So glad you're here, Yogi. Stay in touch. Be well.